Hey friend and fellow church drummer, if you're a new church drummer playing modern worship music like I was back when I was 16, you are in the right place today. If you're struggling with having to learn new songs by ear, week to week, you're having a hard time playing the tom patterns. It seems like there's so many of them and it's hard to just play them well and play them right. You feel like your time is shaky, you're constantly being told that you're too loud, and you just feel lost, overwhelmed, and not sure what to actually focus on or practice during the week to week. If you're dealing with any of that, if you can relate to any of that, this lesson is for you. Trust me, I've been there. Unfortunately, many new church drummers are focusing on the wrong things in their playing. I know I definitely was 16 years ago. Thankfully, as soon as you start shifting your focus to the right things, you automatically start sounding better and everything gets easier. Today, we're breaking down the 7 biggest things I wish I could have known before my very first time playing in church back in September of 2009 when I was 16 years old. I know it can feel like every Sunday is a trial by fire, flying by the seat of your pants. And so my goal and hope today is to give you clarity, direction, and encouragement, and most of all, just to remind you that you can do this even when you feel like you don't know what you're doing. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome to The Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're hanging out today. I help self-taught beginner drummers know what to practice so that you can nail songs and be the drummer that people actually want to play with and want to jam with and want to have in their band. And hey, I have a special free gift for you. This is brand new in the description below, made just for you as a church drummer. This is my 15 go-to grooves and fills for worship music, the Church Drummer's Guide to the Essential Tom Patterns, fills, as well as how to fluently play grooves and fills in 3/4 and 6/8 time. So something that's been voiced to me by a lot of church drummers is that the biggest struggles are playing all the tom grooves well. There's so many tom grooves in modern worship songs. We've seen and heard these a lot over the last 15 years. And playing those can be challenging. And then we run into these weird time signatures like 3/4 when we're playing certain hymns like In Christ Alone, Jesus Paid It All. There's also a lot of 6/8 songs, more than we usually encounter in pop music or especially in classic rock. And so sometimes that can be uncomfortable, but this guide helps solve that for you by giving you the building blocks. I'd be willing to bet, I won't promise that learning everything in this guide that you'll be able to just use all this in every single worship song. It could happen, but odds are you'll be able to play 9 out of 10 worship songs with the grooves and the fills that you learn in this guide. They're all notated out for you. There's play-along audio, so you can learn this stuff. And if you're new, you can just finally have some building blocks so that you feel empowered and actually able to go and play this kind of music and play it well. And so I hope you have fun with this. My free gift to you, go grab it in the description. It's a free PDF e-guide, 15 go-to grooves and fills for worship music. All right, let's dive in today. That really will be your companion to today's lesson, and so definitely don't miss that. Be sure to grab that. So, thing that I wish I knew as a beginner, number 1, a good tom groove requires space. This is the tom groove secret we were referring to in the thumbnail. A good tom groove requires space. So something I've heard from church drummers is they're frustrated with all these tom grooves. They're like, I just want to play basic time, and let's just play a simple groove. Because we kind of know inherently as drummers that simple is better, less is more. And so a lot of times we feel like in doing these tom grooves, things are too much. It's just over the top. It's just too big. Especially if, let's say we're in a verse, and the verse is the tom groove, and then the chorus we get bigger. Sometimes what can happen, especially when we're in environments where we need to not play too loud, is the verse ends up feeling like... And it's kind of like the whole thing was just loud and it kind of felt like a mess, especially if we're just playing a whole bunch of jungle drum stuff. And so really the thing that you have to think about here, the reason all these tom grooves work on all the records, think Holy Forever. So like I guess it would be the second verse of Holy Forever, the Chris Tomlin version. There's a lot of versions of it. But in the second verse, we just hear this really sparse kind of tom pattern. I'm probably not going to play it for you note for note like what's on the record, but it's basically this. That's basically it. What it is not is... And that was my mistake when I was a new drummer in high school. What I was doing, because I was not able to play something sparse well, I was just playing a bunch of notes and kind of just throwing things at the wall and seeing what stuck and what worked. But the thing that is very much worth practicing is working to get one limb independent enough, it almost doesn't matter which one, ideally both, independent enough from your foot that you can just go. Be able to do that. Be able to play a sparse tom groove. Or go really slow and just practice going. Basically, it means being able to hit a drum with either hand in between the kick drum notes. Kind of like. And being able to do those different sorts of things. We've got other lessons on the channel going more in depth with this sort of stuff that I think will help you out with this more specifically. But I just want to give you the big picture thing here is practice playing your tom grooves with less notes and just thinking about what is the main rhythm. Sometimes all that it is this. It's just the one and just that. And so maybe it's only on the floor tom. Sometimes that's all it is. Sometimes it's one E and to the and. Sometimes there's that extra and, or it might be. Sometimes it continues. Every song is a little bit different, but we're hearing a lot of variations of that a lot of times. Sometimes it starts on a different place on the beat, like an and. The second chorus of King of Kings by Hillsong, you hear something like. So it's a little bit different, but still it's not. It turns into full-on punk rock if there's too many notes. So that's why the sparseness is key. Teaching yourself to just play a few things. Like, what if I can just play 3 notes each measure with my hands in this tom groove? Well, it's 4 including the beat 4 backbeat on the snare. Just 4 notes with my hands in the whole measure. Practice making yourself do that and be really simple with your tom grooves. That's going to help them start feeling so much better, and that really is the tom groove secret, so that it doesn't feel so over the top, but it still feels big and reverberant. This is totally my opinion, but I think the reason why we've been hearing a lot of that in worship music is because everybody's trying to make their song as big and epic as possible. Everybody wants their mix to feel like it's just this huge room, and so we hear a lot of toms because toms do that on the drum set. If we're playing a groove that's right here, that's not big and epic, but if we're going as my stick tangles into my jingly thing, even if you're not hitting hard, it still feels big. You don't have to hit hard to do it. And so what the toms do is they create note length, and I think that's why we hear that so often, because it just makes stuff feel big and epic, and that's what everybody's trying to do. Thing number 2 that I wish I knew as a beginner drummer: playing with good time starts with listening, not gluing yourself to a click. So my biggest fear was playing out of time, and ironically, the first few Sundays that I was playing, all I was doing was dragging. So this was back in 2009, and we were playing a lot of early Hillsong stuff. The very first Sunday I played in church, the set list was The Time Has Come by Hillsong United, Holy is the Lord by Chris Tomlin, and then How Great is Our God, also Chris Tomlin. Those were the classics of the 2000s. If you were playing in church back then, if you were going to church then to a modern worship service, you remember all those. But The Time Has Come by Hillsong is pretty fast. It's one of those really fast songs, and it's got, when you get into the chorus, it's one of those, like, back when upbeat worship music just felt like Green Day, that's what everybody was trying to do. The song tempo, I think, was 147 beats a minute, and the whole time as we're playing it, so it should be boom, 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 boom. The whole time it was turning into. It it kept getting slower and slower and bogging down, and I knew it, and the band was telling me that, and it was like, okay, I'm trying to keep this up, my very first Sunday playing. And so my biggest fear was always going too slow, going too fast, rushing a slow song or dragging a fast song. And what took me a long time to realize was that playing with good time ultimately is not learning to glue yourself to a click or to a metronome. It's learning to listen to yourself and know what does good time feel like so that I can be listening and adjusting. So I know that might sound overly conceptual, especially if you're a beginner. We have a lesson here on the channel about an exercise I call the metronome weaning exercise. I'll link that below. You can check that out for more detail. But the idea is practice playing with your metronome, but getting to where you're not actually listening to the metronome. It's your guardrails. The idea is that the metronome is your guardrails, but eventually you're driving in a way that you're not constantly running into them. You're just staying in your lane. And even though the guardrails make you feel better about your time, you're not running into them, so you don't actually need them. That's where we want to get. And the idea is gradually make your metronome more sparse so that it's only playing slow quarters or it's just playing on 1 and 3. And so you start to learn to listen to yourself more and make corrections on the fly. You detect slight changes in tempo. And also another thing, we're going to talk about preparation, like learning songs by ear. But if you listen to the recording of a song a whole bunch of times and really get it in your head, you can't not hear it at that tempo. And so what I learned years later, so back to The Time Has Come by Hillsong, 147 beats a minute. If I play that song in my head now, bum 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 blah blah bum 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 bum, I'm hearing that pretty close. I mean, I could be off a little bit, but odds are I'm hearing it at least between 145 and 150 beats a minute. So I've got to be pretty close in the ballpark. So if I'm remembering how it sounds, how it feels as I'm playing it, I'm making adjustments on the fly. And if at any moment I realize this feels a little faster than the recording, I can just pull it back a little. Or it feels like I'm slowing down too much, let's push it a little bit. That's what playing with good time is. It's not trying to glue yourself to a metronome and feeling helpless without it. It's being actively aware of how fast am I playing and how can I make these corrections on the fly. Check out the metronome weaning exercise below. That'll help you out a bunch. That would have helped me out a lot in my early days of playing in church, but hey, some things I just had to learn by experience. Thing I wish I knew, number 3, creating dynamic variation all starts with your technique, especially hands. So grip and motion is what determines your dynamic range. If you're playing like this, which is probably what I looked like on my first Sunday, where everything's kind of down here really close and maybe a little bit messy, a little bit stiff, a little bit choppy. That is purely a grip and motion thing. But if you practice, instead of being all tight and everything, what if you can have some motion, whether you're playing loud, soft, fast, slow? If you have some motion, that helps you play better in time. That all starts with, and this is ultimately a topic for another lesson, I'll link one below. But that all starts with gripping in a way that allows you to be firm yet controlled, having a fulcrum point up here closer to your palm, curving the fingers around. That way you can airplay. If you can airplay, this means that we're getting rebound without having actual rebound. This means that we can play on a floor tom and still have stick height. We don't want to be relying on rebound. That would mean that we would end up with where we're flailing and nothing sounds good. Or it would mean that we're down here real soft and stiff and nothing sounds good. That was my problem early on. As I learned to expand my motion, that applies to when you're playing soft. In that case, we're kind of just letting the sticks float along, dropping them on the drums, versus if we're playing loud, then we absolutely need that stick height. Also, if we're playing fast, like The Time Has Come. If we're playing in a big enough room that we can play that big and epic and make it feel like the record, we've got to have that stick height. We've got to have that motion. But remember, that's not just for the big and loud. If we're also playing The Time Has Come quietly, we still have to have the stick height. The only time I wasn't using much stick height was on the hats here. If you're playing on the hats and you're trying to be quiet, it's fine to be down low like that. To me, that makes sense. But when you're playing backbeats, we're going light on the cymbals. We're just dropping the sticks on the drum. We're not hitting, we're dropping, but we have that stick height, which helps us be smooth, which helps us play in time. And so having that proper grip and motion gives us this ability to have a huge dynamic range where if we need to be soft, you get the idea. When you have the hand technique together, you can get really, really soft, and then you can get really, really loud, which is great when you're doing big builds. Maybe you've got a song where you need to go. And it just needs to get super loud, but start super soft. You have a massive dynamic range when you're gripping right, when you've got that smooth motion. So totally worth working on. I wish I had known that sooner. I'll link a lesson below for all the detail on that if that's something that you know you need to work on. One other quick note on the whole dynamic thing. Something else that is really important, especially if you're playing in a small room. If the congregation at your church is probably 100 people, 200 people, or if your drums are not inside an enclosure and you're playing acoustic drums, volume is something you have to be very aware of. But here's the thing to remember. Most of the time, your kick drum is not what is perceived as too loud. Most of the time, the toms aren't perceived as too loud. Most of the time, the snare is not perceived as too loud unless you're playing big rim shots. And as a matter of fact, if anybody does say that your snare is too loud, you can take something like a thin cloth, a t-shirt, a bandana, throw that over it. So this snare is tuned fairly high, higher than I would tune it for playing at church. If I tuned it a little lower, this would actually sound pretty cool and kind of gushy and have almost a 70s sound with this. But this does just enough to calm it down and make it a little bit quieter, reduce some of the high frequencies, that anytime I played in a small room and the engineer has said, hey, your snare's a little loud, throw this on here, just hit in the center, no rim shots, and that'll feel great. So just a tip in case that's you playing in a small room. But here's why the whole grip motion thing is important. We need to be able to control how hard we're hitting stuff. We need to hit crashes lightly. We could be hitting the snare like that, and that might be fine. Maybe, so back to the Holy Forever groove, maybe we're playing. That's how loud I would be playing if I were in a small, not enclosed 100 to 200 person setting. And I'd also, so I'm using 5B sticks now, I'd switch to my 5A maple sticks, which are lighter weight. It's just easier to be soft with those. But you saw that I still had some stick height. I'm just gently dropping the sticks. And that means whenever I hit a cymbal, I'm intentionally being light with that. Just like if I go to open hats, just very light. So be able to be light with a hand that's on a cymbal while being a little stronger with a hand that's on a drum. And you can still stay pretty strong on the kick drum because the kick drum's the hardest thing to hear. And so let's say your drum set is not mic'd. That especially means this is critical. And if there's no miking in your church sanctuary, then you can be strong on the kick. And that right there is probably not going to be too loud. So be aware of your kit mix, cymbals light, drums a little stronger, kick drum the strongest, and that will help you out a lot. Record yourself. Put your phone out there in the room, put it in a seat, record how loud you are in the room and how well, are we hearing too much hi-hat? Is the snare too loud? Are we actually hearing too much kick? I don't know. Put your phone out there, record yourself so you know what adjustments to make. And that will also help a lot if you have people constantly telling you that you're too loud, or if the sound guy is telling you that you're too loud. That will also show them that, hey, I'm working on it. I'm trying to do the best I can. I want to sound the best I can in this room, so let me record myself so I can listen back and know what y'all are hearing, and then I'll make adjustments accordingly. And I think everybody's got to respect that. And so not being stubborn about it, not being, annoyed, irritated by it, and just saying, okay, let's see how things are sounding. I'm going to record, and then let's listen back and talk about this. That's a really good way to get along with people in any musical environment, just to work with them and not always be butting heads with them. Okay, felt like that needed to be added as far as the dynamics and everything goes, which still goes back to grip and motion. Thing number 4 that I wish I knew starting out: play from your ear, not your hands. Here's what I mean by this. So I was at a point in my playing, this was actually toward the end of college. I'd been playing in church for about 4, 5, 6 years at this point, and my playing was kind of messy. My backbeats weren't consistent. I wasn't always getting great sounds out of my drums because I was just kind of sloppy. A lot of my fills were kind of too quiet, and there were too many notes. And so things just didn't really sound great. My kit mix wasn't strong. And so ultimately that was because I was just playing stuff with my hands without really thinking about what I was playing. Thankfully, a bass player I was playing with week after week at church, he was a professional player in town, had a lot of great connections. And he said, hey, there's a drummer that I want you to meet. And we ended up sitting down together, I think the very next, it might have even been that afternoon, that Sunday afternoon. Ended up sitting down with this drummer, one of the best in town. And he ended up giving me some really wise advice. Having not heard me play yet, it's almost like my bass player friend had told him, hey, here are all the things that Steven's got wrong with his playing. Here's what I need you to tell him. And so what this drummer ended up telling me was incredibly helpful. There were several things he told me, but a big one was play less from your hands, more from your ear. And basically what he went on to say, he said, there are drummers here in town who can play circles around me, but my ear is what makes my playing unique. Because I'm playing from my ear. I'm thinking, what does this song need? How can I support the song? How can I sound good in what I'm playing? How can I just, be a great sounding drummer who is supporting the music and being musical and intentional in what I play? And that all starts with my ear. That's not just a hand thing. The hands need to be able to execute what my brain says, but brain first, ear first. Play from your ear, not from your hands. And that made a huge impression on me because it changed the way I approached fills. That was another thing he told me. He was like, the fills separate the men from the boys. And so I started thinking about that, and I was like, yeah, I'm kind of playing wimpy fills where, we might be, playing a rock song, and let's say the song is kind of like this. Believe it or not, those were the kind of fills I was doing. I specifically remember playing some fills where I'd be like, and I was like, hey, this is pretty cool because it's a lot of notes. The problem with that is I was playing this flurry of notes that my hands kind of just knew automatically without actually thinking about what fill needs to happen. So instead, I shifted gears and started thinking, okay, what fill needs to happen here? All depends on the song, all depends on what's going on in that moment, but the idea, what this drumming mentor and coach really for me for a time was telling me was think in rhythms, think in melodies. This all goes back to our lesson last week. Our lesson last week about improvising, thinking in rhythms. When you can learn to think in rhythms, your fills get so much more impactful and compelling. And impactful was the big word that he told me. We're going to talk a little bit more about this, but he was basically saying, hey, your fills need to be intentional. So instead of just playing, how about play something like, there's nothing wrong with throwing some notes in there if that's what it needs, but it needs to have some melody to it. It needs to have something the listener can grab onto, something cool and interesting. And also, every fill should be played to be heard. If you're not playing it to be heard, why are you playing it? And so instead of going, that was a mess there. I didn't even get to the downbeat in time. Instead of playing something like that where it's so soft, it's like, what was that? And it also doesn't cue the band well. When the band just hears you going, they have no idea when you're coming back in on the crash. And so you're not leading the band well. You're not cueing the band well. If instead, what if you play? You can't go wrong with the flam on 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and or and a 4. It kind of depends on the song, but flam on 4. Or if it were on the and a 4. All depends on the tempo of the song. You get the idea, but finishing a fill with something like that can help the band out, and you'll find the band gets tighter and sounds better when you play impactful, specific things like that. You kind of have to think like a big band drummer. You know, in jazz, big band stuff, you hear things like there's always a, I say always, most of the time, you're gonna hear like a snare flam preceding a band hit. You know, those are the kinds of fills you hear in big band drumming. You don't just hear. That would be so messy and the band wouldn't know when to come in, but if instead you play the kinds of fills that Sonny Payne is playing with Sinatra, with the Count Basie Band, on the Sinatra at the Sands live record. It's a really cool jazz big band record to check out. But you hear him playing stuff like, you know, he's smashing crashes, but he cues every one of those with a big, like a big rim shot or a big flam. It's also obvious and clear. And so that's what you want to be thinking about with your fills, so that stuff isn't getting lost. Be intentional. Be intentional with your kick drum patterns. Pay attention to what you're doing. Just start thinking about what you're doing, being aware of what you're doing, and not just playing from your hands or from your feet, but also from your ear. We can talk about this all day. One additional little thing along that topic is, a lot of times, if you want to make something feel really big and epic, playing more notes is not the way to do that. Playing more notes creates tension and kind of builds things up, but if you want something to then be like, wah, play less notes. Example would be the last chorus of What a Beautiful Name, going from the bridge into, well, I said the last chorus, really it's the second to last. We've got that whole bridge where we're building up. So we've got that whole thing where we're building up, and then we're getting into the reason why that chorus feels so big is because we've simplified. We're playing 2 kick drum notes each measure, 2 snare drum notes each measure, and we've just got this wash of sound. The more space you put into a groove like that, the bigger and more epic it's gonna feel. So you can be building up and going, and if you're in a setting where you can play really loud, you can purely use that volume to create the energy, not playing more notes. And even if you're having to play softly, it still works. It's just reducing everything down. It's all about creating that contrast. And so when you go from a lot of notes to fewer notes, it actually makes things feel bigger and feel more epic. Okay. Thing number 5 I wish I knew as a beginner: pay attention to every sound you create. This, again, goes back to the advice from that drumming coach and mentor for me. Hit the middle of your drums, get high quality sounds. That was something that he told me. He was like, make sure that you're hitting the middle of your toms. It was as if he had watched me play, and maybe he did. Maybe my bass player friend sent him a video and was like, hey, look at Steven. Who knows? But either way, he knew what I needed to hear, which was hit the middle of the drums. There's a huge difference in sound quality. Let's say we're playing a fill. Sounds nice when we're hitting in the middle of the toms, but what if we go like this? That was kind of messy. Or what if it sounds like this? Where our volumes aren't even either. It wouldn't matter if our time is good, if the volumes are not even, and if our sounds are not consistent, it's going to sound sloppy. And so we could be super even with time, and we could go. And it was like, what was that? But as soon as the dynamics are even and the sound is even, then we're talking. Now, it doesn't mean they all have to be the exact same volume. We could play something like, it all goes back to intentionality, being intentional with what you're doing and making sure you're getting good sounds out of your toms. And something else he told me was make sure your backbeats are even. That means, you know, each time you're hitting the same spot on the snare. You're not going. You get all sorts of different sounds depending on where you hit, but hit in the center each time. Or if you're playing loud, hit the same rim shot every time. That most definitely applies to snare fills. If you're playing, make sure those rim shots are all even. You can go, you can ramp into something. Again, it's all about intentionality. It's not like every note has to be the same volume. That's boring. We got to have dynamics in our playing. But whenever you're changing those dynamics, be intentional about what you're doing. That's what it ultimately comes down to. Okay, thing number 6 that I wish I knew as a beginner drummer. What to do to prepare and learn songs and how you do it is absolutely critical. So kind of the thing I'll give you here, food for thought. Know the song better than the rest of the band. And that's not to be an arrogant thing, a know-it-all thing. Your goal as a drummer shouldn't be to, you know, one-up the band and be like, I'm going to show these guys, I'm going to be better than all these guys, these guitar players that can't play in time, and these singers who can't remember how the song goes. I get the frustration with that. You might be in one of those situations where you are dealing with guitar players who can't play in time. I've been there. Maybe you're dealing with singers and worship leaders who are just really shaky in a lot of ways. And so you might feel like you're the person in the band who has to be the anchor, who has to be solid. And yeah, that's your job as the drummer. What I want you to be thinking about is, how can I know and understand the song really, really well? That might mean knowing it better than everybody else. It doesn't mean knowing their parts better than them or knowing all the words better than the singer. But it does mean when you prepare, listening to the song over and over and over again. That needs to be a big part of your preparation process. Listening to the song a whole bunch, getting it in your head, knowing the story of the song, knowing the emotion of it. So here's, I'll give you some specific things here, just a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that the drummer leads the band. It is your job as the drummer to lead the band. That's especially critical if the other musicians maybe aren't strong, maybe they're having a hard time with time, maybe they're having a hard time remembering how the song goes. You as the drummer can help them stay in time by being solid with your time, and you can help cue them. Remember, we were talking about that with the fills. One of your jobs as the drummer, it's not just to keep good time and be the metronome. Your job is to lead everybody through the song. And that means a couple things. One is that if we're going into a chorus, let's say we've been in a verse and we're going into a chorus, make it obvious that we're going into a chorus. Play a fill or whatever the fill needs to be, but make it clear that, okay, we're going to get a little louder here. We're going to go into the chorus. And that goes for general dynamic changes too. Like if the band needs to hit a certain rhythm hard, let's say you're playing a chorus. Sometimes you'll run into songs with band hits. Make that very obvious and clear. It doesn't mean you got to hit it super hard if you're playing in a small room, but it does mean be very intentional. It's kind of like you're looking at everybody and you're saying, here's what we're doing. And if you're feeling like the band isn't really with you when things ramp up, like if things need to get strong and need to get big and epic, let's say you're playing in an enclosure, and so you can get pretty loud. Going back to What a Beautiful Name, let's say you're at the end of the bridge, the bridge repeats a few times and we go into the big chorus. If we're getting to the end of that and you feel like, the band they're just being kind of wimpy right now, we really need to ramp up the energy, like this is big, this is huge, then show them that with how you're playing. Because if you're just sitting there going, if everything you do is static, dynamically and emotionally, the whole band is going to be static, dynamically and emotionally. And something that you need to pay attention to is the changing emotions of the song. You know, spiritually, what is happening is you're paying attention to the lyrics as everyone in the congregation is worshiping. What are the things that are happening? And so we can go really deep with that, but even just at a surface level, what is the emotion of the song and how is that changing? Where do we need to get stronger? So even if we can't get super loud in that bridge, if we're starting off very chill, we're coming in like that, and we're starting to ramp up. It all goes back to the dynamic contrast, but really being intentional with what you do to show the band, hey, this is how we're going to play this. That was another thing that drummer who was my coach and mentor for a time taught me. He came to a rehearsal and watched me play. We had this moment in a song where it was... There was this and a 4 push, boom, 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 boom. And then we came back in. And actually, I think it was at the end of a 4 on the floor part. So it was like... And he came up and he was like whispering to me, he was like, hey, the way you're playing that, you're not hitting that hard enough, and so nobody else is hitting it with you. It's like they don't know to hit that because you're not making it obvious enough. He's like, here's how I would do it. I would, do the toms with it, boom, 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 and just make it really obvious. And kind of ramp into it with the hi-hat too. Anyway, so if the band needs to hit something harder, show them that they need to be hitting it harder. So know the story of the song, know the lyrics, the emotions, the dynamics, all the parts that you play. Know all of that stuff like the back of your hand because you've listened to it a whole bunch. But here's some specific tips for song learning, song charting. One is listen to the song through headphones over and over. Like if it's a new song, listen to it at least twice, if not 5 times. If you've got the time, listen to it a couple times every day leading up to Sunday. But then 2, write a roadmap chart. So most worship songs follow a very predictable format, which is the pop format. Verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. Now in worship songs, a lot of times it's verse, chorus, and then there might be a little interlude where we kind of get quiet maybe, and then the bridge happens, and the bridge might happen 4 times. That's the unique thing to modern worship music. The bridge might happen 4 times, and we're gradually building up, then we go to a big chorus, and maybe the chorus repeats. Yeah, there's some variations in different songs, but for the most part, that's what's happening. So you can expect that. Verse, chorus, bridge a bunch of times, chorus, and then we're out. That's what most songs are going to do. So write out your roadmap chart according to what the song's doing. Then number 3, count the measures. So if the song is in 4/4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4. So there was a 4 measure section there, and here comes another section. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, and so on. 4, 2, 3. And a lot of sections are going to be 8 bars long. That's something else you can expect. Most song sections will be 8 bars. Maybe a turn, a turnaround after the first chorus, before the second verse. That might just be 4 bars, or maybe a chorus could repeat and be like 16 bars. It's going to depend, but for the most part, songs are built of 4, 8, and 16 bar sections. Maybe you're playing a song that's in 6/8. That was a 4 bar section right there. And so you're listening 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 4, 2, 3, 4. You're counting it out so you can put it on your chart, and you'll learn to feel these sections so that you're not having to count. Ideally, nobody's counting during the worship service. That's the last thing we want to be doing. We don't want to be counting. So we're doing the counting now in our preparation so that when you see 4 bars, you can be like, oh yeah, 4 bars, that's short. 8 bars, okay, that's twice that long. And you'll learn to feel this stuff so that you're not having to count, I promise. There's a lesson here on the channel about this whole concept in more detail, so I'll link that for you to go watch. Okay. Way number 7. I know this is a longer lesson, but if you've stuck with me up to this point, you're going to do awesome playing in church because you've got the patience. You got the patience to learn all this stuff and learn all the nuance and the subtlety and the detail. So, hey, I'm glad you're still with me. Number 7. 7 thing I wish that I knew, and this is really a big one. This isn't about you. I promise that you will be less tense, nervous, freaked out, self-conscious, insecure, self-doubting if you realize this sooner than later. Unfortunately, I did not realize this sooner or later. And so every Sunday I was terrified for months because we get it in our heads that everybody is watching us, everybody is listening to us, and everybody's waiting for us to fail. And sometimes these are valid things because maybe others around us haven't been as supportive of us playing the drums as we've wanted them to be. Maybe we felt guilty for playing an instrument that's really loud and that sometimes annoys family members. And so there's a lot of these kind of mental baggage that we carry with us sometimes. And the thing is, odds are nobody's paying nearly as much attention to you in a worship service as you think they are. And it's kind of like, in a way, the drummer is kind of like the bass player, where like nobody's really paying a lot of attention to the bass. And as long as the bass is playing the right notes, then nobody even really notices the bass is there. That's not to say nobody should notice you, but you should be playing so well, blending into the song, blending into the band, and not being too loud, that yeah, nobody's really like thinking that much about what you're doing. If anything you're doing is like jumping out way too obvious, then okay, maybe there's a problem there. It all depends on the song and the volume, the style that you're playing. But most likely, nobody is scrutinizing your playing as much as you are. Probably you are your worst critic. And so that's something that you have to work on letting go of and start realizing now, because that will hold you back, because you'll always be putting too much pressure on yourself. I was in that position where I was trying to be as perfect as I could be, and any little mistake would just drive me nuts. If I made a mistake one Sunday, it would bother me the rest of the day. It would be like, okay, next week I'm gonna try again, I'm gonna do better next week. And so that kind of stuff, it's especially hard. I was in high school, I was 16, and so I was playing in front of my peers, and I was an introvert. I was never the cool kid. I was never popular. I never really had my people in the youth group. I grew up at a big church with a big youth group, and so it was kind of like, being at a school where you've got all these different groups of people, and you got the gamers, you got the nerds, you got the jocks and the athletes, and I didn't have a group that I fit into. And so the worship band kind of became my group I fit into, but I always felt this pressure to impress people because I had been so not impressive in my life. I was, the late bloomer kid that I was little and scrawny and terrible at sports, and so I kind of felt like, hey, this is how I can finally prove myself. This is something I can finally be good at. And so that very easily became my identity. And you really have to be careful about that, because you'll put way too much stock in that, put too much pressure on yourself, and that perfectionism will drive you nuts. So let go of that sooner than later and know that, hey, I want to be good at this. I want to do well. I want to grow by 1% every week. And I want to serve my church well. I want to lead my congregation in worship well. I want to serve God and serve others and do this really fun thing that I love doing. And so make sure that that's your mindset. It's okay to want to be good at it. We should be excellent in everything that we do. I remember reading somebody's quote that they were like, something nobody talks about is that Jesus probably made really good tables. Like, he was probably a really good carpenter before his 3 years of ministry. Think about how long he was a carpenter before he was, 30, and went into ministry for 3 years. We should be excellent too. God's given us gifts, things that we need to refine, that we need to not perfect, because we can't be perfect, but we can get really good at these things and use these things and be excellent in what we do. So we should absolutely do that, but that is not something that should be our identity or the thing that we cling to. So remember, love what you do. Be passionate about playing at your church. Love serving, love playing the music, love being there every Sunday with the people you get to play with. But don't let it be your identity. I've been there and I've done that. And so the sooner you can move away from that, the better your church drumming career, if you will be, and the better all these Sundays are going to be. So, hey, I hope this has been helpful to you. Thanks for hanging out. I know this is a longer lesson, but there was a lot to cover, a lot to talk about today. There's going to be some more church drumming content coming soon. If you're on my email list, you got my survey a month or so ago, just asking you questions about, hey, if you're a church drummer, tell me what you're struggling with. And so I've been taking stock of all that and hearing your voice, and so there's going to be a lot more content coming. But I hope this helps you feel like you've got at least some direction and some clarity as to what to focus on and what to practice. And hopefully you're able to improve your time and dynamics and how you approach learning songs. And hopefully you can fear less, stress less, because you now know how to prepare well. You know how to approach this. So I hope this has been valuable to you. I hope this has been helpful to you. Be sure to grab that brand new e-guide below in the description, the 15 go-to grooves and fills for worship music, the Church Drummer's Guide to the Essential Tom Patterns, Fills, and fluently playing in 3/4 and 6/8 times. So go grab that, it's gonna help you out a bunch. As always, stay non-glamorous. I'll see you on the next lesson. You can do this.